Good afternoon, students. Hope you all are well. I am also well. In my last class, I talked about the selfish giant 1. Today, I will talk about the selfish giant 2. In my last class, you saw the selfish giant hung a notice on his wall that trespassers would be punished. After that, what happened to the children? We'll see it. So, students, let's see. The selfish giant too. Here the keyword is castle. So castle means large building or fort. You can say the children had now nowhere to play, as the giant put a notice on his wall that trespassers would be punished, and so the children uh, are now not going to the garden because if they go to the garden without his permission, the selfie giant would punish them. So now the children had no place to play or no garden to play. There were no gardens around and the roads were busy and crowded. The children had only one garden, but that garden was forbidden to them, so they didn't have any place to play. As the roads were very much busy and crowded, and there were no gardens around here and there, so they failed to play. After school, they used to go round the high wall and talk about the beautiful garden inside. As they had no place to play, after finishing their school, they came to the high wall and talked to each other that how happy we were there. They said to each other. That means they were very happy when they got chance to play in the garden of the selfish giant. But now they are not happy. Then came the spring. So, in the spring season, flower blooms, birds sing, and all over the country there were flowers and there were birds. So the spring declares that this is the spring season because everywhere there are flowers and everywhere the birds sing. But what happened to the garden of the selfish giant? Only in the garden of the giant it was still winter. So as the selfish giant didn't want the children to play in his garden, for that reason, in the garden of the selfish giant, it was not the spring, it was still winter. So, what happened in the winter? In winter seasons, no birds sing, no flowers bloom. So, same is the case with the selfish giant's garden. Here, no birds were singing and no flowers blossoming. There were only snow and frost and not wind in it. So, as there were no spring in the garden of the selfish giant, there was winter, so there were only snow and frost and not wind in it. In the what should I say, winter season, north wind blows. The selfish giant is talking to himself like that. I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming, said the giant. So the giant failed to understand that why in his garden the spring is late. He was sitting at the window of his big castle and looking out at his cold, dry, lifeless garden. So he was sitting before his window of his big building or fort and looking out. So in his garden there were no life, as there are no flowers blossoming, and still there were cold and dry. So he was in tension. He was thinking, and he was worried about the season, spring season. Why in his garden still there is, uh, what should I say, winter? I hope there will be a change in the weather. So he is talking to himself that there might be a change of the weather. For that reason, there were no spring in his garden and it is coming late. He was thinking to himself, but neither spring nor summer came to his garden. Now, my dear students, as the giant forbade the children to play in his garden, and he hurt the heart of the children or mind of the children, so God has given him punishment. How was that punishment? Only in the garden of the selfish giant there were no spring, no summers. So, my dear students, here is the learning for you that you are children and you shouldn't never hurt the mind of the children. So, my dear students, in my next class, I will tell you about the selfish giant tree, and you will understand what the selfish giant do after that. Till then, Allah Hafiz.